continue my kind of readings on this Anarchy.Works primer by Peter Gelderloos. So I've already read much of these prior sections talking about competition and all this other stuff. Today we get into the section of haven't humans always been patriarchal? So if you want to check out my prior sections, check it out on my YouTube. I'll post a link. Maybe I don't know. This is really a test to see, if this gets recorded on my Twitch because I fixed the settings. I think to record the VOD or VOD, however these people say it. So we'll see if this works. I only have a few minutes, so it won't be long. It's really more of a test than anything else. But if this works out, we're probably gonna do this again and for a longer stream and all that other stuff, all that good stuff. But yeah, let's see how this goes. Haven't humans always been patriarchal? One of the most ancient forms of oppression and hierarchy is patriarchy, the divisions of humans into two rigid gender roles and the domination of men over women. But patriarchy is not natural or universal. Many societies have had more than two gender categories and have allowed their members to change gender. So already we're off to a great start here. Absolutely beautiful talking about this gender fluidity, because often people easily make that mistake of just assuming that nature and humans have always been binary system and domination of the male and all that other stuff. But nah, like even earlier on in this prior chapter talking about competition, they speak about the Mabuti who switch gender roles, who play games and have societal structures where it's more about the cohesion of the community as opposed to any one gender being dominant. So I'm very excited to get into this. Um, some even created respected spiritual roles for those who did not fit into either of the primary genders. Yep, a lot of Native Americans, a lot of African spiritualisms and stuff like that, or spiritualities, spiritual peoples, spiritual practices. The majority of prehistoric art depicts people who are either of no determinate gender or people with ambiguous, exaggerated combinations of masculine and feminine traits. That's very interesting. Yeah. In such societies, gender was fluid. It was something of a historic coup to enforce the notion of two fixed, idealized genders that we now consider natural. Yeah. Just like the whole, blue versus pink. That was a super recent thing that just happened the last century, the last generation with marketing, right? They was like, oh, we can better market products if we have a clear gender binary and if we have clearly blue for males and pink for women. And that has been flipped. That like 'cause before blue was seen as a girly color, you know. So it's absolutely hilarious how people, how quickly people kind of assume traditions when in actuality it's fairly recent. Um, Here we go. Items that were not considered natural. Speaking in strictly physical terms, many perfectly healthy people are born intersexed with male and female physiological characteristics, showing that these categories exist on a fluid continuum. It makes no sense to make people who do not fit easily into one category feel as though they are unnatural. Right, 100%. Even in our patriarchal society, in which everyone is conditioned to believe that patriarchy is natural, there has always been resistance. Much current resistance by queer people and transgender people takes a horizontal form. One organization in New York City called Fierce includes a wide spectrum of people excluded and oppressed by patriarchy: transgender, lesbian, gay, bisexual, two spirit as honored category in many Native American societies for people who are not identified as strictly men or women, queer, and questioning. Even the Vikings. Like there was a recent study I saw that showed that even the Vikings had, gender fluidity and had, these kind of two-spirited people. I forgot the exact word for it, but there's a word for people who did not identify as either or gender or both, right? And they were highly respected in the Viking kind of a society. And I list that one because that's seen as, especially to Europeans, as the kind of masculine, gender role thing. And it's like, oh yes, the Vikings. It's so popular nowadays about the Vikings, but they were fairly, progressive. So, huh. um, queer and questioning people who have not made up their minds about their sexuality or gender identity, or do not feel comfortable in any category. Yeah, that's me. Fierce was founded in 2000, mostly by youth of color and with anarchist participation. They uphold a horizontal ethic of organizing by us for us, and they actively link resistance to patriarchy, transphobia, and homophobia with resistance to capitalism and racism. Their actions have included protesting police brutality against transgender queer youth, education through documentary films, zines, and the internet, and organizing for fair health care and against gentrification, particularly where the latter threatens to destroy important cultural and social spaces of queer youth. Yeah, that's very important there. I did a little design project for this company called Quell. I actually got to start working with them again. They're based in Texas, in Austin, and they're trying to build a community, center community kind of platform around this, around LGBTQIA plus people. And we interviewed quite a few, at least a dozen um, folks in this community. And what we saw is a lot, but one of these things that's in relation to this aspect is that many of these people um, struggle with a lot of like what you would think would be simple things, like for instance, poverty and homelessness. Right? It's even worse with this crowd because they're kicked out of their homes for coming out or for being um, being outed, and then they don't get the usual support for homeless people because most of those homeless kind of resource groups are specifically kind of uh focused on just one gender, right? Just for women or for men. And if they don't find it fall into either one, then what? Or if they don't, it's just a number of ways that people just fall through the cracks, and that's really unfortunate and sad. So yeah, it's cool. It's awesome that people are working on this. At the time of this writing, they are particularly active in a campaign to stop the gentrification of the Christopher Street Pier, which has been one of the only safe public spaces for homeless and low-income queer youth of color to meet and build community. Yeah, that's another thing that's so freaking frustrating. Like all these things about homelessness, and it's like many of these politicians, these people don't actually care about homelessness or fixing the problem. They're just hiding them under the rug, trying to get them out of the city, get them out of the streets. You're not actually, helping them get out of the streets. You're just shoving them, in dark corners where they're not visible on the streets. I'm just like, that doesn't solve the problem. Like, if you have some, dirt in your house, you can't just sweep it under the rug and say you're clean. It doesn't work like that. I'm not calling homeless people as the dirt. I'm just saying like people view them. That's the perception. People view these as like the dirty folks, and it's very sad because I've talked to a number of homeless folks, and people, it's just like they just want to like just having a conversation with them is oftentimes something that is unique, because a lot of people ignore homeless folks. And a lot of people just don't even begin to give them the light of day. So it is really unfortunate. Um, yeah. Since 2001, the city has been trying to develop the pier, and police harassment and arrests have multiplied. The Fierce campaign has helped provide a rallying point for those who want to save the space and change the public debate so that other voices are heard besides those of the government and business owners. Our society's attitudes, attitudes about gender and sexuality have changed radically in the past centuries, largely because of groups like this taking direct action to create what is said to be impossible. That's beautiful. Resistance to patriarchy goes back as far as we care to look. In the good old days, when these gender roles were supposedly unchallenged and accepted as natural, we can find stories of utopia that upset the assumption that patriarchy is natural and the notion that civilized progress is bringing us steadily from our brutal origins towards more enlightened sensibilities. In fact, the idea of total freedom has always played a role in human history. Indeed, like that's like the whole. I talk about this a lot in my podcast, but the idea that we live miserable, short lives, back then, and when in reality our lifespan has not increased ever. Like we still have the same 70 years roughly of life expectancy as people thousands of years ago, right? The only dip in that life expectancy actually happened due to things like agriculture, things like industrialization, and stuff like that. um it's so stupid. In the 1600s, Europeans were streaming to North America for a variety of reasons, building new colonies that exhibited a wide range of characteristics. They included plantation economies based on slave labor, penal colonies, trading networks that sought to compel the compel the indigenous inhabitants to produce large quantities of animal skins, and fundamentalist religious utopias based on the total genocide of the native population. Yeah. But just as the plantation colonies had their slave rebellions, the religious colonies had their heretics. Heretics. One noteworthy heretic was Anne Hutchinson, an Anabaptist who came to New England to escape religious persecution in the Old World. She began to hold women's meetings in her house, discussion groups on free interpretation of the Bible. Um, yeah, and of the Bible. I don't know why that inflection. As the popularity of these meetings spread, men began to participate as well, and won popular support for her well argued ideas, which opposed the slavery of Africans and Native Americans, criticized the church, and insisted that being born a woman was a blessing and not a curse. Yeah, that's freaking sad. Like, that people saw like being born as a woman as a freaking curse, man. That's. We have a lot to work on. The religious leaders of the Massachusetts Bay Colony put her trial on for blasphemy. Look at that, man. But at trial, she stood by her ideas. She was heckled and called an instrument of the devil. And one minister said, "You have stepped out of your place. Oh my. You have rather been a husband than a wife, a preacher than a hearer, and a magistrate than a subject." Goodness, these people. That was us, y'all. This was our society. And we're not much better. Look at Texas. Like, upon her expulsion, Anne Hutchinson organized a group in 1637 to form a settlement named Pocasset. They intentionally settled near to where Roger Williams, a progressive theologian, had founded Providence Plantations, a settlement based on the idea of total equality and freedom of conscience for all inhabitants, and friendly relations with the indigenous neighbors. These settlements were to become, respectively, Portsmouth, and Providence, Rhode Island. Early on, they joined to form the Rhode Island Colony. Both settlements allegedly maintained friendly relations with the neighboring indigenous nation, the Narragansett. Roger Williams' settlement was gifted the land they built on, whereas Hutchinson's group negotiated an exchange to buy land. Interesting. Initially, Pocasset was organized through elected councils, and the people refused to have a governor. The settlement recognized equality between the sexes and trial by jury, abolished capital punishment, witch trials, imprisonment for debt, and slavery, and granted total religious freedom. That is amazing. That's beautiful. The second synagogue in North America was built in the Rhode Island colony. In 1651, one member of Hutchinson's group seized power and got the government of England to bestow him governorship over the colony. But after 2 years, the other people in the settlement kicked him out in a mini revolution. Amazing. After this incident, Anne Hutchinson realized that her religious beliefs opposed magistracy. Goodness, or governmental authority. Yes, definitely oppose that. And in her later years, she was said to have developed a political religious philosophy very similar to individualist anarchism. Beautiful. One might say that Hutchinson and her colleagues were ahead of their times, but in every period of history, there have been stories of people creating utopias, women asserting their equality, lay people negating the religious leaders' monopoly on truth. Awesome. So unfortunately, I have to stop here. I have to go pick up my sister, but we might pick this up later. Um, this is great. I love reading about this stuff. I love sharing it and reading out loud. And I know nobody's watching right now because I didn't tell anybody I was doing this, but yeah. But let's hope this got recorded. If so, then I'll definitely continue this because that means I could do two birds with one stone. I could record, do these streams, and then put it out on YouTube too. and then make clips and put it out other places. So we'll see. But yeah, thanks for watching, and there's nobody watching, but thank you anyways. Have a great day. See you. Bye bye.